Starry River, Chapter 7. The sun was finally beginning to dip in the sky, and Widow Yan was frying her famous fermented tofu. It was strange how something that smelled so foul could taste so delicious. The joke about fermented tofu was that it was the most disgusting it smelled, the more delicious it was. Widow Yan's tofu seemed to be proof of this, as an odor reminiscent of rotting garbage mixed with an unemptied chamber pot reeked from it. Rindy could not think of anything that smelled more unpleasant, but he had often seen Mildain sneak some of the tofu over the wall to Paillet, who ate it with rapture. Rindy brought the teacups to the table, setting them down one by one with a solid thud. With each thump, Master Chow groaned. "Oh, my head," Master Chow said, placing the palm of his hand to his forehead. "Please give me some quiet and some peace." Rindy grimaced. He needed peace more than Master Chow. Every day he had to listen to the innkeeper's petty bickering, and at night the sky's crying tormented him. Rindy was starting to believe the sounds were all in his head. Was he going crazy? He tried not to think about it. "I suppose one person's noise is another's friendly sound," Madame Chang said, turning to Mr. Shan at the table. "Much like the story of the rooster's cries to the sun, is it not?" Mr. Shan started, jerked out of his thoughts for a moment. Rindy frowned and rolled his eyes. That afternoon, Rindy had watched when Madame Chang first saw old Mr. Shan, with his long white beard, hobbling on his cane through the door. She'd gone straight to him, smiling, and took his hand into hers. In return, Mr. Shan had stared at her vaguely, as if seeing her in a fog. Then he shook his head, sat down at his table where his food was waiting, and immediately began chewing with an absent-minded air. Rindy was surprised how graciously Madame Chang treated such a snub. Her smile waned, but instead of being insulted, her eyes softened, and she sat down next to him, pouring his tea. She'd been kind and gentle to Mr. Shan, insisting on sitting with him at lunch, and now dinner, as if he were a beloved grandfather. Rindy couldn't understand it. "Story?" Pei asked as she brought the teapot to the table. "Like this morning's story about the suns?" "Yes," Madame Chang said to her, but she was looking quietly again at Mr. Shan. "Have the old stories been forgotten already?" Mr. Shan stared back again in his confused way, and said senselessly, "I lost the book." Rindy swallowed an annoyed sigh. Mr. Shan was getting more witless every day. "I want to hear it," Pei said. Rindy was eager as well. Therefore had been a few tales Rindy was eager as well, for there had been a few tales told in the dull inn of the clear sky, but he flushed when he saw Madame Chang looking directly at him. "Would you like to hear it?" she asked. Rindy tried to shrug indifferently. "I guess so," he said. The story of the rooster's song. After Wang Yi shot down the five of the 6 suns, the last sun fled from the sky. In fear, it hid inside a tall mountain. Now, instead of boiling and burning, the people had another problem. The moon still floated in the sky, and its light made it possible for villagers to see dimly, but it was not enough to warm the earth. The villagers huddled together as the plants and trees began to freeze. "The sun must come out," Wang Yi said. Everyone agreed, but what could they do? They went to the mountain where the sun was hiding, and threatened and pleaded and bribed, to no avail. The sun refused to come out. But just as they began to despair, the wind murmured a message. "A friendly call will bring out the sun," the spirit of the mountain whispered. "A friendly call." What did the spirit of the mountain mean? A friendly call. The villagers had tried the sweetest words and pleasant voices already, and the sun had not budged. It was Wei Ying's wife who understood. "The sun doesn't consider us friends. It will not answer our calls," she said. "We must find something that the sun thinks sounds friendly." Well, first they brought out a cricket, which had a pleasant chirp, but its sound was faint, and the sun could not hear it through the stone of the mountain. Then they brought out a tiger, whose loud, angry roars echoed across the land, but the sound enraged the sun, and it spit fire in annoyance. Well, they decided then to bring out the cow. Its relaxed lows were sure to be calming to the sun, and they were. The sun inside the mountain was lulled by the cow's sound and almost went to sleep. The villagers began to panic. What sound will call out the sun? They asked themselves. What will sound friendly to it? Let's try a rooster, Wang Yi's wife said. The rooster? The others said, dubious. Most found the rooster's voice to be grating and strident. It's loud enough to be heard through the stone, she said, and its voice is not full of anger or leisure. Well, let's try the rooster. So they brought out the rooster, which gave its loud, triumphant crow. The sun listened carefully. What a nice noise, it thought, and it peeked out of the mountain to see who was calling. The sun's first rays reached out and touched the rooster. In its light, the rooster turned a radiant golden color with a comb as bright as red as bright as red as a burning flame. When the villagers saw this, they realized the sun was coming out, and they cheered as if it were a grand celebration. The sun, now hearing so many friendly sounds, was pleased, and it came all the way out of the mountain. And that is how the sun returned to the sky. But the rooster, the one that turned gold, was it special then? Pei asked. Yes, Madame Chang said, nodding. It became the celestial rooster, and it is the sun's friendly companion to this day. And is this why the roosters crow in the morning? Rindy couldn't help asking. He was thinking about Widow Yan's rooster, which woke him up every morning just as the night stopped its moaning, and he was able to fall asleep. He disliked that rooster very much. Yes, Madame Chang said, giving him a pleased smile. The roosters are calling out the sun, just like the celestial rooster did a long time ago. A long time ago, Mr. Shan echoed unexpectedly. For a moment, Rindy saw a flicker in his eyes, a sharp brightness that he'd never seen before. But then it disappeared, and Mr. Shan slurped from his bowl, dribbles of soup falling onto his beard. Chapter 8. At night, the sky remained moonless, and the mournful sounds, such as much as he tried to ignore them, kept Rindy awake in his bed. He gritted his teeth in frustration. How many nights had the sky wailed, and how long had he been in this village? Would a new guest ever come? But a new guest had come. For a moment, Rindy stopped his usual glowering, and started to think about Madame Chang. She had brought no cart for him to hide in, but she brought stories. And when she told them, Rindy felt transported, away from the village and that he despised, and from unwanted memories. He remembered Madame Chang looking at him with that pleased and most tender smile, and it had been a smile that a mother would give her child, and it filled Rindy with longing that made him turn and sigh in his bed almost as much as the groaning sky. Oh, a muffled whine blended into the howls of the sky. But this moan had no eerie echo, and came from right outside Rindy's room. He rose from his bed and opened the door to see Pei huddled in the doorway of her room with a lantern. It's so dark, Pei said. The stars don't really shine, and the moon is gone. Did she hear the wails? Was it not just in his head? Rindy began to ask, but then looked at Pei's small, upturned face. As her frightened eyes met his, he saw the start of tears forming. A wavering softness seemed to curl inside Rindy, like smoke from an incense. Pei reminded him so much of... The memory stung him with a slapping pain. Rindy scowled. "You probably just scared it away with your drippy pig nose," he said. Fear disappeared from Pei's face as anger replaced it. "Horrible! You don't care about anything," she said, her white cheeks turning red with rage. "Everyone else sleeps. Why don't you?" "Pei, why aren't you sleeping?" Master Chow's voice called from the stairs. As he came into view, Rindy felt himself flush. "And you too, Rindy." "We were just..." Rindy began, but Master Chow cut him short. "Now go to bed," Master Chow said. "Both of you." They nodded, and Rindy silently retreated to his room. However, inside he was seething and wanted to scream with the sky. "Everyone leaves, why don't you?" Pei had said he would leave if he could. If only a guest with a carriage or a cart would come. It wouldn't matter where it was heading. Any place would be better than here. Any place but here, Rindy thought. Or home. But it was here where he was stuck. The next morning brought the rooster's crow, the hot sun, and a new chore, but no new guests. Rindy sagged at the table at breakfast. "That old well in the back dried up for good last week," Master Chow said. "Now it's falling apart. I don't want a guest taking a night stroll to fall into it. Rindy, you'd better fill it up this morning." "Fill it?" Rindy asked. "I guess it's the first well in the village to go dry," Master Chow said. "If something doesn't change, there'll be more. Pretty soon, all the villagers will have to get their water from the half-moon well like we do. Pei will show you where the shovel is." Moments later, with the shovel on his shoulder, Rindy followed Pei as she crossed the yard with skipping leaps. The sun seemed to be rising up into the sky by jumps and leaps, as well, because the top of Rindy's head felt as if it were smoldering. Full of resentment, he thought of the shaded pavilions and cool, iced plum juice brought by bowing servants. "What am I doing here?" Rindy glared in disgust as he slowly began to dig the crumbly earth. The ground was surprisingly soft and light, and without any heavy rocks or stones. More like dust than dirt, Rindy thought. He looked across the barren plain of stone left by the missing mountain. "Guess all the stone is there." As Rindy dropped a shovelful of dirt into the well, and it seemed to scatter down like drops of water being shaken from a tree after the rain. But as the earth fell, a strange, deep sound began to echo. "Rap, rap," groaned the well. "Rindy!" Pei said as she threw herself on the ground and peered into the deep hole. "There's something in there!" Chapter 9. Rindy kneeled and looked into the hole. Pei was right. There was something there. In the blackness of the bottom, two beady eyes looked up at him. "Brrrr," it croaked up. Rindy almost laughed. It was a toad. It was an old, ugly, warty toad sitting on a rock in a dark puddle of water. The toad moaned again, reminding Rindy of the mournful sounds that kept him up at night. Was it this toad that's been making the wails in the sky? Impossible. The sounds bellowed in his ears like loud thunder. This toad's creak was almost a faded echo. "It's just a dumb old toad," Rindy said, and threw in another heap of dirt. The toad screamed again. "Stop!" Pei said, jumping up. "You'll kill it!" "I'm not killing it," Randy said, irritated. "I'm filling the well. I'm doing what your father told me to do." Rindy tossed in another pile of dirt and "Rap, rap," the toad wailed over and over again, as if now realizing what was happening. The cries were like the sounds of a funeral horn. "Stop it! Stop it!" Pei screamed, grabbing his arm. "You'll bury it alive!" "Who cares?" Rindy sneered, and pushed away Pei's hands. The sun was scorching his head and arms, and he was burning inside as well. He didn't care about anything in this hot, dried-up village. If he could, he would bury all of it, everything, anything to make his past, the crying night, and the village of clear sky disappear. "What is wrong?" Madame Chang said, her gentle voice blowing over him. As he and Peggy turned around, Randy felt again as if they should kowtow on the ground before her. She stood there gracefully, her dark eyes gazing down upon them, and Randy felt ashamed. "Rindy has to fill the old well, but there's a toad down there," Peggy said in a pleading tone. "If he fills it, he'll kill the toad." "I see," Madame Chang said. Careless of the fabric of her silver-gray robe, she kneeled beside the old well and looked in and smiled. "Too hot for fur?" she said to the toad. Peggy gave Rindy a confused look, and he shrugged. The toad continued its melancholy song, and Rindy wondered what Madame Chang would do. The well was too deep for her to reach the toad, even with a stick. Would she ask him to get a rope and climb down? He cringed. The decrepit old well was cracking and breaking. It was likely that part of the well would collapse with him in it. Suddenly, the toad was silent. Madame Chang stood up. "You can continue your work, Rindy," she said. "But if he fills up the hole, the toad will—" Pei sputtered, torn between her manners for a guest and her feelings. "Don't worry," Madame Chang said, gently putting her hand on Pei's shoulder and leading her away. "The toad will be fine." Pei looked doubtful, but as she continued to look at Madame Chang, her expression slowly cleared and transformed into one of puppy-like adoration. If Pei had admired pretty Mei Lin as a lady, now she was worshipping Madame Chang like a queen. Rindy stared at their backs as they both walked away. In silence, he shoveled the earth into the well. Madame Chang's appearance had been like a soft wind cooling his anger, and now Rindy began to feel troubled. Each drop of earth weighed on his conscience. Was he killing the old toad? Why was the well quiet? Had the toad found another way out? Or was it dead already? Finally, Rindy looked over the edge. His mouth fell open. He couldn't believe what he saw. The toad was sitting cheerfully on a pile of dirt, the same dirt that Rindy was flinging into the well. Rindy tossed in another mound and then watched as the toad shook it off and vigorously jumped, patting the earth down onto the surface. The toad was making a hill from the dirt that was filling the well. Each shovelful Rindy threw in, the toad rose higher. So Rindy continued to dig. His hands were chafed raw, and he had been obliged to dig further and further away from the well in order to not create another hole. The sun made his head feel as if it were a burning blister, and sweat dripped from his brow like a melting icicle. Finally, the toad was getting closer to the top of the well. Now Rindy could see it sitting attentively on the dirt pile, its greenish-brown warts making it look like a piece of rotten wood covered with mushrooms. The toad's black eyes were flashing in eagerness, and just when it was high enough for the toad to see out of the well, it gathered itself like an expectant warrior. With one last shake, the ugly, ancient toad gave a billowing croak, a war cry, and with a powerful leap, jumped into the solid ground next to Rindy's feet. "Arrgh!" the toad burped. To be continued.